This is Jacob's Well, a simple blue opening on the surface, but in reality, it is a massive underwater cave, which is roughly 1.5 kilometers long. In the middle of the dive site, a simple and beautiful cave with crystal clear water on the riverbed. How fascinating it is, right? But while jumping into it, you will realize its whole different experience. It is so beautiful from the outside, but it is the complete opposite from the inside. This cave alone killed 9 people at different times, and that's why it becomes not only the dangerous cave of Central Texas, but also the deadliest cave site in the world. And yes, I will cover some horrifying as well as interesting story in this video, which was literally shocking for me. You are watching Story Rush. 9th of September, 1976. A group of 20 friends set up a camp near Jacob's Well, and they planned to dive into Jacob's Well. Unlike others, because no one actually goes inside it. 3 people took space: Kent Morpin, Mark Brashear, and third Joe Moe. Kent Morpin's simple plan was to touch its real depth. That too, in the middle of the night. The logic of diving at night was that the river would be completely empty, and no one would even see them going inside the well. Interestingly, Jacob's Well is connected to a large underground aquifer, known as Trinity Aquifer. Basically, aquifer is a layer of porous rock or sediment which stores and transmits underground water, and because of this, there is 640 liters of water per second supply in Jacob's Well. And this is also the reason why Jacob's Well is so clean. In general, mostly people swim in the river of this area, instead of going inside it. No one goes inside it. Because of the fast flow of water, no one can even go inside it. But with time, the water current has started slowing, and now it was possible for all 3 of them to go inside it. And also, human beings have a basic nature. They are curious. They want to know what's inside it. And people can't even stop themselves from going inside, and then the reputation of the cave gets ruined. Anyway, at 11:30 in the middle of the night, Mark, Kent, Joe enter Jacob's Well and start their first dive. Kent and Mark were both very experienced divers, plus they had already dived in Jacob's Well many times, so they were not afraid of the upcoming danger, and they were moving towards its depth. 25 feet below, they faced the first chamber of the cave. See, Jacob's Well is actually made of many rooms and chambers going down, which progressively get smaller as you go deeper. After the first 25 feet depth, a small corridor comes there, towards the waist, which connects to another large chamber. And again, after going vertically 55 feet, a third horizontal chamber comes. And this room once again goes down diagonally, around 75 feet deep. And the real challenge starts from here. There is a narrow opening between the 3rd and 4th chamber, only 15 inches. To go inside it, you actually have to remove your tank, and then you have to move the tank forward and go into the hole. The horrifying thing is that no one knows what's ahead of this opening. But Kent had heard different things about it. Some people say that there is only a dead end ahead, and others say that there is a big chamber there. And Kent also knew that at least 4 divers have already gone to explore it, but they never returned. But Kent was not one of those people who would be scared of such things, and the probability of a big chamber was very appealing to him. He sees that both are inspecting the small opening ahead and moving forward, and surprisingly, both start removing their gear without any hesitation and start putting the tank in that hole. And the most shocking thing was that they didn't even have a backup light. Neither was there a safety line, and neither was it clear what their plan was, because there had never been a discussion about this before. And by the time Joe reaches his place, both had gone to the 4th chamber, and he can only see a glimpse of both the lights, and then both disappear, as if they were never there. Joe was in complete shock, because Kent and Mark were wearing steel tanks, whose air capacity is less compared to aluminum tanks, which Joe was wearing. And on top of that, they were going deeper, which simply meant that they were going to consume air faster. And he soon realizes that his air is about to run out, which means the situation of both of them would be even worse. In the end, what he could do was to take out his dive knife and hit the air tank with its non-sharp edge, so that it makes a sound. And until its air tank is completely empty, he takes out his light and throws it in the narrow opening that leads to the 4th chamber, so that maybe they can get a signal from it and come back if they are lucky. And then he turns around and comes back to the surface. Joe wasn't sure about going to the surface, whether they would be alive or not. But after some time, it becomes clear to him that there won't be a rescue mission now, but a body recovery mission will start. Interestingly, the body recovery mission was also going to be very bad for the rescuer, a double tragedy. This is Don Dibble, a former Navy diver and cave diving expert, and he was leading this body recovery mission. But by the time he came near Jacob's belt, it was completely dark, and Don's first thought was to wait till morning. According to his experience, the best time to recover an ex-person would be in the middle of the day. Right. Basically, he referred to the dead person as an ex-person, so that in the rescue, he can separate himself from that reality, that that person is no longer alive. However, when Don Dibble and his team reached the site, before that, one person had gone down to look for Mark and Kent. So actually, his name is not mentioned in any report. So I don't know his name, but he was very brave. Literally, very brave. He dived back-to-back twice in the chamber below. For 19 minutes, because it is very dangerous to dive back-to-back like this. He was exhausted, but he couldn't see any sign of Mark and Kent. But by then, he had developed a decompression signal, and that's why he has to go to the decompression chamber for recovery. And this also shows what is the biggest problem in the rescue. See, this dive planning table represents how long a diver can stay and how much depth, and how long you should go back to dive. Like you can only stay in the depth of 140 feet for 8 minutes. After that, the chances of decompression sickness increase highly, and then you have to take a decompression stop and slowly go up. And that diver had dived twice back-to-back without taking a risk, and then he gets decompression sickness. But he was really brave. Anyway, back to the story. Don Dibble, the in charge of the rescue mission, was still unsure about the condition below, so he sends 2 divers down. But the sad part was that his body was not found. The opening to go to the 4th chamber was completely closed, with more small stones. The next day at 10 a.m., Don and his entire rescue team enter Jacob's well and come to the 4th chamber by diving, and they start clearing the stones at the entrance of the chamber. But unfortunately, it was happening the opposite way. The more stones they remove, the more stones slide and come there, and take his place. After hours of hard work, there is a little progress, although still the space was very small. But still, Don and his rescue team enter the entire chamber 4 without any hesitation, and thankfully, before entering it, he had already set up a safety line. For safety purposes, obviously. As soon as they enter, they first go to the top of the ceiling of chamber 4 to see if their bodies are floating there. But still, their bodies were not there. No sign of both of them was visible. And Don then checks his pressure gauge, and he finds out that he has 10 more minutes of air left. So he hits another full round of the 4th chamber, but unfortunately, he could only see a few stones, and he was not able to see anything more than this. And suddenly, Don realizes one thing, that due to its movement and the current of water, the stones on the ceiling are moving and are about to fall. And by the time he realizes this, that stone had fallen on him. His torso and both his arms were stuck in both the stones, and he gets stuck there. He was not even able to move, and that too in the water at a depth of 140 meters. And just in a second, the whole area was silted out. His arms were totally stuck, and that's why the safety line is missing from his hand. And neither was he able to give his signal to the diver next to him. And as I said, the whole water was silted, so he was not even able to see anything. Thank God Don was an expert, and he remains calm in this situation too. But he was able to feel that his breathing rate was increasing when he is applying energy to remove the stone. I mean, it happens that he was now consuming more oxygen. And horrifyingly, there comes a moment when he breathes. Then no air comes out of his regulator. He tries again. Still no air comes out. And in panic, he takes out the regulator from his mouth and starts drinking the water around him. And when he realizes what he is doing, he shakes the stone, and surprisingly the shock was so violent. Because of this, both his arms become free. Thankfully, at that moment, his teammate Calvin comes here and puts the regulator of the spare tank in his mouth, and then he breathes properly. And this was his second big mistake, because he inhaled the air so desperately that some parts of the air goes into his stomach instead of going into the lungs, because Don Doohan inhaled the air at a depth of 140 feet below. And because of the pressure of the depth there, the air is compressed, right? I mean, its volume is small. And the way Don and Calvin were back out, they were going upwards, so the pressure of the air in Don's stomach was decreasing, and that air starts expanding, and by the time he reaches the surface of Jacobville, the volume of air in Don's stomach had increased by 5 times, and it felt like he was a 9-month pregnant lady. Although he tried to get the air out of his mouth, but it was of no use. He was screaming in pain till now. And then Don gets a surgery in the Brook Medical Hospital. His stomach had expanded so much, it had expanded so much, that it was ruptured. There was a hole in his stomach, you know. And the doctor tells his experience after the surgery, that as soon as he cut Don's stomach with a scalpel, he felt as if he had cut a basketball, and that ball deflated immediately. And by the time Don was in the hospital, Kent and Mark were being searched here, and Don Broad was leading this mission. Their names are quite similar, and as I said, the cave was not mapped till then, so no one actually knew how deep the cave is and how many chambers come ahead. So Broad's plan was simple, that they will go ahead of the 4th chamber, in the 5th chamber, where no one has gone yet. Maybe Kent and Mark will be there. But the thing is, when Broad goes to the entrance of the 4th chamber of Jacobville, then the way to the 4th chamber was closed. There were big stones there, and it was compulsory to remove them, to go inside, because the map of the cave was like this. So whatever stone was there in the cave, it would slide directly to the entrance, and they would have to remove all those big and average-sized stones to go inside. And I don't know how Don's team went to the 4th chamber so easily in the beginning, but now it was clearly impossible to go inside without removing the stone. More than 20 divers were working inside. All of them close the stones in a sack and pull it up with a rope. It was not an easy job, as it seemed, and in the beginning it seemed that it would be done in a day or two. But the whole week goes by doing this. And at the end of the week, Hayes County Park Department, the rescue team there is tension between Kent's father and the people of the city, because by now the money had run out near the dive company to rescue further. Kent and Mark were both dead, and a rescuer was a victim of decompression sickness, and the second professional diver had a hole in the stomach of Don DeWall, and now the rescue team didn't have money to come for the rescue. They started taking donations, but still, they didn't have enough money to be able to rescue further. They needed an alternative, and they got it. So the entry in the story is of the Schaefer Diving Company. This was another non-profit organization, which used to run rescue operations. And interestingly, it had multiple advanced equipment for the rescue. The owner of this company, Levis Schaefer, gives an interesting statement. He says in the media, "It's easy. We will easily get Kent and Mark out." And now it felt like, yeah, it is possible now. This company had a separate rescue team. Along with it, big advanced equipment, including recompression chamber, a large vacuum-like. With that, they could easily suck out the stones in the jack-of-all-trades. They set up the entire entrance to the Chamber 4, where there was an air supply system, and a two-way communication system was also possible. To remove the stones, they also use a feeling net bike, with which the stones easily float upwards, and the cost of this operation starts at $5,000, just to take all the equipment inside, to set up. And the daily expense of this mission was $2,500. Levis Kidding was expecting that they will do this work in 2 or 3 days, but they didn't know one thing, that this is a never-ending process, because the problem was, the surface of the cave, the walls of the site, was made of loose stones, so if there was any movement, went to map Jacob's Veil then. And right now, if we talk about the present, then Jacob's Veil is still publicly open, and it is allowed to go inside it to a certain extent. And if you want to go deeper than that, then you have to take a permit. And if you are an experienced diver and want to try something different, then of course, you can go to Chamber 4. But remember one thing, that you may never be able to see the surface again, I guess. So guys, that's it for the video, and please do subscribe.